The child pointed at the CEO and whispered, "Why is he in Mommy's locket?" Silence followed. "Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. In the bustling city of New York, within the elegant walls of one of the finest restaurants, an unassuming waitress named Sarah was finishing her shift. The restaurant, known for its opulence and high-profile clientele, had been her place of employment for the past 3 years. But on this particular evening, something was about to change her life forever. Sarah was always diligent, working tirelessly to support her young daughter, Lily. The two of them had lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn, just far enough from the city's hustle to remain unnoticed, but close enough to make a living. Sarah's life, though simple, was filled with the love and joy of being a single mother. She often found herself reflecting on the life she could have had if things had turned out differently. She had dreams, once, of a career in art, but life had a way of throwing unexpected challenges her way. She had to take up waitressing at the high-end restaurant to make ends meet. Lily, her sweet, curious daughter, was the center of Sarah's world. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that was enough. The night started like any other, with guests arriving in their finest attire, the chatter of business deals, and the clinking of wine glasses filling the air. Sarah was preparing for the usual evening rush when she noticed something unusual. A man, tall and confident, dressed in a sleek, expensive suit, entered the restaurant. His name was Mr. Jameson, the CEO of one of the world's largest tech companies. He had been to the restaurant several times before, but this time was different. Sarah had heard rumors of his recent divorce, but she never paid much attention to the gossip. Tonight, however, there was an air of tension around him. He sat at his usual table, alone, his sharp eyes scanning the room. As Sarah approached his table to take his order, Lily, her daughter, who was waiting quietly in the back room of the restaurant, suddenly darted out into the dining area. She had always been a shy child, but on this night, something compelled her to run into the room. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the man sitting at the table. Without hesitation, Lily pointed at the CEO, her finger aimed directly at him, and whispered loudly, "Why is he in Mommy's locket?" The room fell silent. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Her hand froze mid-air as she held the notepad and pen, her breath catching in her throat. Every eye in the restaurant turned toward the small girl, who had just shattered the calm with her innocent question. The CEO, Mr. Jameson, looked at Lily with a stunned expression. He had been speaking to his assistant when the words reached his ears. His face, usually calm and composed, betrayed a rare crack in his usually impenetrable demeanor. Sarah's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the tension rise in the room, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. She had no idea how to respond. How could Lily, in her innocence, know about the locket? She had never mentioned it. The truth was, Sarah had kept the locket as a private memento, a cherished memory of a past she wished to forget. She had never shown Lily the photo inside, never discussed it. So how did Lily know? The CEO stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He took a step towards Sarah, his gaze never leaving Lily. "Do you know who I am?" he asked softly, his voice steady but filled with curiosity. Sarah's heart raced even faster. She glanced down at Lily, who was still staring at Mr. Jameson with wide eyes. She didn't know how to explain the connection between them, but deep down, she had a sinking feeling. This man, this stranger who had walked into their lives, was more than just a passing figure. He was about to turn everything she knew upside down. The CEO, Mr. Jameson, stood frozen for a moment, his eyes still locked on Lily as she innocently looked back at him. The silence in the room was suffocating. The other diners, previously engaged in quiet conversation, now watched the scene unfold with wide eyes. Sarah's heart raced as she stood there, unsure of what to do next. She felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the restaurant and heard the muffled conversations around her, but nothing could pierce the tension between her and the CEO. Mr. Jameson stepped toward her slowly, his eyes still focused on Lily. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of confusion in his words. "Do you know who I am?" he asked again, this time more deliberately. Sarah's chest tightened, and for a moment, she hesitated. She had never imagined a scenario like this. Her life had always been simple, straightforward, and private. But now, here was this powerful man, standing in front of her, his question hanging in the air. Yes, she finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. You're Mr. Jameson, the CEO of Tech Global. The words felt strange coming out of her mouth, like an acknowledgement of a world she had never been a part of. Mr. Jameson nodded slowly, his eyes scanning her face for any signs of recognition. He then shifted his gaze to Lily, who was still staring up at him, her innocent curiosity written across her face. Do you remember me, little one? He asked, kneeling down to her level. Lily took a step back, still holding on to her mother's hand, but she didn't flinch or shy away. Instead, she looked at him with wide, unblinking eyes. I've seen you in Mommy's locket, she said simply. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The locket. How could Lily know about the locket? She had never shown it to her daughter. It was a secret from her past, something she had kept hidden for years. Her mind raced. Her thoughts tangled in confusion and fear. The locket had been given to her by someone she had once loved. A man she had left behind when life took an unexpected turn. A man who had promised to return, but never did. She had always kept it close, never allowing anyone to see it. Not even Lily. And now, here was this man, Mr. Jameson, standing before her, the very person who had been in that locket all these years. Mommy. Lily's voice pulled Sarah back to reality. She looked down at her daughter, who was still holding her hand, oblivious to the storm of emotions brewing inside Sarah. Sarah forced a smile, trying to mask her panic. What did you say, sweetheart? I said, why is he in Mommy's locket? Lily repeated, her voice innocent and sincere. The words were like a sharp knife to Sarah's chest. She had never imagined that Lily would ever say something like that, let alone in front of Mr. Jameson. The weight of the truth hit her like a ton of bricks. Could it really be possible? Could he be the one she had left behind all those years ago? Could he be Lily's father? Mr. Jameson stood up slowly, his expression unreadable. He was processing the words, trying to make sense of the situation. He looked at Sarah again, his eyes narrowing slightly. Is there something you're not telling me? He asked, his voice soft but firm. Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her hands trembling as she tried to find the right words. The truth was so complicated, so tangled up in the past, that she didn't know where to begin. How could she explain to this man, this stranger, what had happened all those years ago? Sarah started, but the words stuck in her throat. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. I don't know what to say. Mr. Jameson sighed, his eyes softening as he took a step closer to her. I think it's time we talk. All of us. He motioned to Lily, who was still standing there, holding onto her mother's hand. Sarah glanced down at her daughter, who was completely unaware of the gravity of the situation. She looked back up at Mr. Jameson, who was waiting for her response. There was no turning back now. She couldn't lie anymore. Not to him, and certainly not to Lily. Sarah took a deep breath and nodded slowly. Okay, she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Let's talk. As the words left her mouth, she knew that her life, and Lily's, was about to change forever. I have been watching her for the past 5 minutes, trying to piece together the mystery in my mind, but I still can't wrap my head around it. It's not just the way she stands, or the way she smiles at her daughter with an unspoken understanding. It's the way she holds herself. There's something deeper here, something I haven't seen in years. The CEO of one of the world's largest companies, a man who has been successful in everything from acquisitions to international expansion, now finds himself in the presence of a woman who seems to have nothing but her quiet strength. It should be easy to write her off as just another waitress, another person whose life is shaped by the whims of those with more money and power. But something in her eyes keeps me here. Something about her feels familiar. As I stand across from Sarah, my mind races. The image of that locket flashes back in my mind. The same locket I had once given her years ago when we were both different people, two souls with the world at their feet. The woman standing before me now, though, is no longer the person I once knew. She's a mother with a daughter who may very well be mine. Sarah, I say softly, trying to break the silence that hangs between us. I don't know what to say either, but I need you to understand, I never wanted to leave. I pause, not knowing how to finish the sentence. It feels like an apology, but it's more than that. The reality of what I've missed hits me with a wave of guilt. I never thought I'd be here, standing in front of her, holding this burden. The weight of time lost with a child I didn't even know existed. Sarah looks at me, her face softening just slightly, but there's still hesitation in her eyes. I know, she replies quietly. I know you didn't choose this, and neither did I. Her voice cracks just a little, and I can tell that she's been carrying this secret alone for so long. She's been living a life without me, raising our daughter without ever telling her who her father was. And now here I am. But you have to understand, Sarah continues, her eyes searching mine. I didn't keep Lily from you because I wanted to. I kept her from you because I thought it was safer. I didn't want her to grow up in your world of expectations and business deals and people who only care about what they can get. I can hear the anger in her voice, but I also hear the pain. She's right. I've built a life that's been far removed from family, from love. I've built a world where power and money mean more than connection. I wasn't ready to be a father, I admit, the words tasting foreign in my mouth. But I would have been, if you had told me. Sarah shakes her head, her expression hardened now. It's not that simple. You think it's just about telling you? About revealing everything? You think I could have walked into your world and said, here's your daughter. Take her into the life you've created for yourself. It wasn't that easy. You didn't deserve to have her. The sting of her words cuts deep, and I feel a lump form in my throat. I didn't deserve her. I realize now how true that is. I spent so much time building a career that I neglected everything else. I neglected the woman I loved, and I neglected the child I should have been a part of. You're right, I say finally. I wasn't ready, but I want to be. I want to try. The words feel like a promise, but I know I've already broken so many promises in the past. Sarah sighs, her shoulders sagging as she looks away from me for a moment. You can't just come in here, Mr. Jameson, and expect everything to be fine. I've worked so hard to give Lily a life without the complications of this world, of your world. I've kept her away from the lies and the deceit that I know exist. And I won't let her be torn apart because of decisions I made years ago. I can't blame her. She's done everything for Lily, and I've done nothing. Then let me prove to you that I can be a part of her life now. Let me prove that I can be the man I should have been. The silence between us stretches, but this time, it feels different. It's not the silence of doubt or fear. It's the silence of a new beginning. Lily, still standing beside her mother, watches us carefully. Her innocent eyes flicker between us, sensing the tension but not fully understanding it. I bend down to her level, wanting to bridge this gap, to connect in whatever way I can. Lily, I say softly, do you remember me? She shakes her head, her little lips parting slightly, as she watches me with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. That's okay, I reply, forcing a smile. We'll have time to get to know each other. I promise. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I might actually be able to keep that promise. I sat there, staring at Sarah, who now looked at me with a mixture of wariness and guarded hope. There was so much history between us, so many unspoken words that we had both carried for years. The weight of the past seemed to press down on me, but there was something else in the air now. Something different. Maybe it was the way Lily, standing beside her mother, glanced at me with those innocent eyes, or maybe it was the quiet, unspoken agreement that we were both ready to try again. But I knew one thing for sure. This was not going to be easy. I had to prove to Sarah that I could be the man she needed me to be, not just for her, but for Lily too. I don't expect everything to change overnight, I said, my voice steady but unsure. But I need you to trust me. I want to make this right. I want to be there for Lily. I want to be a part of her life. Sarah shook her head slowly, her gaze falling to the floor. Trust isn't something that comes easily for me, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Not after everything that's happened. I could feel the weight of her words, the truth behind them. She had been alone for so long, raising Lily on her own, doing everything she could to protect her. I had been absent, a ghost in their lives, and now I was asking for a second chance. I know I've made mistakes, I replied, my voice softening. And I know I can't undo the past. But I want to try. I want to be here for both of you. There was a long pause, and I could see the conflict in Sarah's eyes. She was torn between the past, which had hurt her so deeply, and the possibility of a future where things could be different. Lily, still holding her mother's hand, looked up at us both, her eyes wide with curiosity. I could see the question in her gaze. What did all of this mean? Who was this man who was now standing in front of her, talking about being part of her life? Mom, who is he? Lily asked, her small voice cutting through the tension in the room. Sarah glanced down at her daughter, and I could see the softening in her eyes as she looked at the little girl she had protected so fiercely. This is someone from the past, Sarah said, her voice gentle. Someone who used to be very important to me. Lily nodded, her expression still confused but accepting. She had no idea what was really going on, but she trusted her mother. I'm sorry, I said, turning to Sarah. For everything. I know it's not enough, but I want to make up for lost time. Sarah finally looked up at me, her expression unreadable. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice low. You can't just come back and expect everything to be okay. There's so much more to it than that. I could see the pain in her eyes, the years of struggle, the weight of all the moments she had spent on her own. I'm not asking for everything to be okay, I said softly. I'm just asking for a chance to show you that I can be here now. For both of you. Sarah didn't respond right away, and for a moment, there was only silence between us. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the background, marking the passage of time. I knew that every second mattered now. Every word I said was crucial. This was the beginning of something new, something fragile, and I had to handle it carefully. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah finally nodded. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But this isn't going to be easy. It's not just about you and me. It's about Lily too. I nodded, my heart swelling with a mixture of relief and anticipation. I understand, I said, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes. Sarah's eyes softened, just a little, and I could see the walls she had built up over the years begin to shift, just slightly. You need to prove it, she said, her voice steady. And you need to understand that I'm not going to just let you waltz in and become part of her life. You've missed so much already. I know, I replied. But I'll prove it to you. I promise. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in Sarah's eyes, a trace of hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. We'll see, she said, her tone cautious but not dismissive. But don't expect things to change overnight. I took a deep breath, knowing that this was just the beginning. I understand, I said quietly. And for the first time in years, I believed that maybe, just maybe, I could make this right. I woke up the next morning, my mind still heavy with the events of yesterday. The weight of the conversation with Sarah, the unspoken truths, the fragile bond we had started to rebuild. It all felt surreal. I had made promises, but promises were only as good as the actions that followed them. I needed to prove myself, not just to Sarah, but to Lily too. I wanted to be a part of her life, but more than that, I wanted to be the father I should have been all along. The CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, I had navigated countless deals, acquisitions, and mergers, but none of those experiences could have prepared me for the complexity of this situation. This was personal. This was real. As I made my way to the office, my mind kept returning to that moment when Lily had pointed at me and asked why I was in her mother's locket. The innocence in her voice, the confusion in her eyes. It hit me harder than I expected. She didn't know who I was, but in some strange way, she already had a connection to me. She had a piece of the past I had forgotten. It wasn't just a photo in a locket. It was a memory of a life that I had walked away from. The office was quieter than usual. My assistant, Marie, had already left for the day, and the hum of the air conditioning was the only sound that filled the space. I sat down at my desk, staring at the city skyline through the window. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. We need to talk. The simple words sent a shiver down my spine. I hadn't expected her to reach out so soon. I had promised to prove myself, but this felt like a test. The last thing I wanted was to push her away again. I stood up, grabbing my coat from the chair, and made my way out the door. The streets of Manhattan were bustling with life as usual, but today, everything felt different. The world seemed to be moving around me, but I was caught in a moment that had yet to unfold. I arrived at Sarah's apartment a few minutes later, unsure of what to expect. The doorman greeted me with a nod, and I made my way up to her floor. When I knocked on her door, I was greeted by a quiet, cautious smile. Come in, Sarah said, stepping aside to let me in. Lily was sitting on the couch, her little legs dangling off the edge, completely absorbed in a book. Sarah didn't waste any time. We need to talk about Lily, she said, her voice calm but firm. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about how you want to be a part of her life. But you need to understand, this isn't going to be easy. She's not going to just accept you because you say you want to be here. I nodded, feeling the gravity of her words. I know. I understand. But I also know that I can't just walk away again. I won't. Sarah sighed, her eyes softening just a little. It's not about you walking away. It's about her. She's been through a lot already, and I won't put her through more heartache just because you want to be a part of her life now. She paused, looking at Lily. The little girl was completely unaware of the tension in the room. I have to protect her. She doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of all this. I could feel my heart tighten. I don't want to hurt her, Sarah. I never wanted to. I never knew. Sarah looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. She was torn between the woman who had been left to raise Lily on her own and the person she had once loved, the person standing in front of her now. I know you didn't know, she said softly. But you have to prove yourself, Jameson. It's not just about showing up and saying you want to be a father. You have to show Lily that you're not going anywhere. You have to earn her trust. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle into my chest. I will. I promise. Sarah didn't say anything more. She turned her attention to Lily, who had looked up from her book and was now watching us with wide, curious eyes. Lily, Sarah said gently. Come here, honey. The little girl walked over to her mother, and Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder. This is Mr. Jameson. He's someone from Mommy's past. Lily looked up at me, her innocent gaze scanning my face, trying to make sense of the situation. Hi, I said, crouching down to her level. I'm sorry I haven't been around. Lily didn't respond right away. She just stood there, studying me, her small hands clutching her book. Why are you in Mommy's locket? She asked again, the same question from the night before. I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest despite the tension. I guess I've been hiding in there for a while, I said softly. But I'm here now, and I want to get to know you. Lily's eyes flickered for a moment, and then she took a step toward me. You're my daddy? She asked cautiously. My heart stopped for a moment, the weight of her words hitting me harder than I expected. I didn't know how to answer. All I could do was nod. Yes, Lily, I'm your daddy. The room was quiet for a moment, and then Lily did something I hadn't expected. She smiled. A small, hesitant smile, but a smile nonetheless. And in that moment, I knew that this was the beginning of something new. Something that would take time, but something worth fighting for. I woke up early the next morning, my mind still swirling with thoughts of the conversation I had with Sarah and Lily the night before. The small smile Lily had given me when I told her I was her father had stayed with me all night, a flicker of hope in a world that had been, up until now, defined by regrets and missed opportunities. But now I was here, facing the most important task of my life, proving to Sarah, to Lily, and most importantly, to myself, that I was capable of being a father, a good father. I couldn't afford to waste any more time. I knew this wouldn't be easy. I had spent most of my adult life focusing on business, on wealth, on power, and I had neglected the one thing that truly mattered. Family. The relationship with Sarah had been my biggest failure. I had walked away from her when I should have stayed, and now, I was determined to make up for it. I had to prove myself not just to her, but to Lily, who was far too young to understand the complexity of the situation, but who had already made up her mind about me. As I walked to the kitchen to grab a cup of coffee, I found myself reflecting on what Sarah had said. Trust wasn't something that came easily for her, and it shouldn't. She had worked so hard to protect Lily, to give her a stable life, and I had been a distant memory. But now, she was offering me a chance. The least I could do was take it. I spent the morning going over some work emails, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Sarah and Lily. What would it take to make Sarah feel secure in letting me be part of their lives? What could I do to earn her trust? My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Sarah. I think we should meet today. I want to talk more about what happens next. I quickly typed back, agreeing to meet at her place later that afternoon. The rest of the day felt like it dragged on forever. Every minute spent at work felt like a wasted opportunity to prove myself to Sarah. I kept reminding myself that this wasn't about business, about wealth, or status. It was about family. It was about healing the wounds I had caused and showing Lily that I could be the father she deserved. When the clock finally struck 5, I gathered my things and headed to Sarah's apartment. The walk there was a blur of thoughts and worries. When I arrived, I was greeted by Sarah at the door, her expression still cautious but not as guarded as before. "Come in," she said, stepping aside to let me in. Lily was playing with her toys in the living room, but when she saw me, she froze, her small hand clutching the edge of her toy truck. "Hi, Lily," I said, softly, kneeling down to her level. She didn't say anything, just watched me with wide eyes, as if trying to figure out if I was really the man who had claimed to be her father. "Do you want to play with me?" she asked after a few moments, her voice shy but sweet. I smiled, relieved. "I'd love to," I said, sitting down next to her. Sarah stood nearby, watching us both with a quiet intensity. I could tell she was still unsure, still wondering if I was sincere or if I would disappoint them again. But this time, I couldn't afford to fail. Not again. As Lily and I played with her toys, I could feel Sarah's gaze on us, but I didn't mind. I was focused on Lily, trying to make her feel comfortable with me. For the first time, it felt like I was finally connecting with her. I had missed so much already, but I was determined to make the most of the time I had left. After a while, Lily got up and ran to Sarah. "Mommy, look. Mr. Jameson played with me," she said proudly. Sarah smiled, her eyes softening just a little. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "You're doing well," Sarah said quietly. "But this won't be easy. It's going to take time." I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I know," I replied. "But I'm here, Sarah. I'm not going anywhere." She didn't respond right away, but I could see the flicker of something in her eyes. Hope, doubt, maybe both. But I knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of something. Something that would take time to build, but something that was worth the effort. We spent the rest of the evening talking, discussing what would come next. Sarah was still hesitant, but I could see her starting to open up, little by little. It wasn't easy, but it was a step in the right direction. By the end of the evening, Lily had already fallen asleep, her small body curled up on the couch. I looked at Sarah, knowing that this was just the beginning of a long journey, but it was a journey I was ready to take. "I'll prove it to you, Sarah," I said, my voice steady but full of determination. "I'll prove that I can be the father Lily needs. That I can be the man you need." She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "We'll see," she said softly, but I could see something in her eyes. A hint of trust, just a small crack in the walls she had built up over the years. And for the first time in a long time, I believed we might be able to rebuild. Together. I woke up to a quiet apartment, the kind of silence that had become so familiar over the years. The kind of silence that used to feel comforting but now felt hollow. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows on the floor. I stood there for a moment, looking out the window at the city below, the city that never stopped moving. It had been a few days since I had seen Sarah and Lily, but it felt like a lifetime. We were still in that delicate phase, the phase where everything could go either way. I had spent years building my empire, learning how to navigate the business world, but nothing in that world could have prepared me for this. Nothing could have prepared me for fatherhood, or for the woman I had once loved and lost, or for the little girl who was slowly starting to let me into her life. I made my way to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee, but even that felt different now. Each sip was a reminder of how much I had taken for granted. I hadn't realized how much I had missed until I was sitting there, thinking about Sarah and Lily. Sarah. I hadn't heard from her much since the night we talked. She had been cautious, understandably so, and I had respected that. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. I couldn't stop thinking about how, despite everything, there was still something between us. I wasn't sure if it was hope or something else, but I felt it, and I knew she did too. I finished my coffee, put on my jacket, and decided to go see them. I had to. I needed to see Sarah and tell her again, tell her with actions this time, that I wasn't going anywhere. I couldn't just sit back and hope for things to change. I had to be the one to make the effort. I arrived at Sarah's apartment later. That afternoon, the doorman gave me a look as I entered the building, but I didn't care. I knew I had to show up, not just for me, but for Lily, for her future, for everything I had missed. When Sarah opened the door, she seemed surprised to see me, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Something that made me think I hadn't completely lost her yet. "You're early," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I didn't expect you today." "I know," I said, my voice steady. "But I thought it was time we talked. Really talked." She nodded, and we both moved into the living room. Lily was sitting on the floor, drawing something with crayons. She glanced up at me for a second, her eyes curious but still a little unsure. I smiled at her, trying to put her at ease. "Hey there, Lily," I said softly. "What are you drawing?" She looked at me for a long moment, her small hands still gripping the crayon, but then she hesitated and turned her paper around to show me. It was a picture of a house, with two stick figures, one tall, one small, standing in front of it. "It's a picture of my family," she said quietly. My heart squeezed at the simplicity of her words. It was such an innocent thing, but it hit me harder than I expected. Sarah watched us, her expression unreadable. "She's been drawing that all morning," Sarah said, her voice soft. "I think she's trying to figure out what this all means." I nodded, my chest tightening. "I understand." I sat down on the couch across from Sarah, my eyes never leaving Lily as she continued to draw. "I know this is confusing for her," I said quietly. "For both of you. But I need you to know, Sarah, that I'm here. I'm here to stay, and I'm ready to be a part of Lily's life." Sarah didn't respond immediately. She sat there, watching Lily, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. "I'm not asking for everything to change overnight," I added, my voice firm but gentle. "I just want the chance to prove myself, to show you both that I can be the father Lily deserves, that I can be the man I should have been." There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought she might not say anything at all. But then Sarah finally looked up at me, her eyes softening just a little. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said quietly. "Not after everything that's happened." I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I know," I replied. "And I'm not asking you to forget the past. I just want to be here now. For both of you." Sarah took a deep breath and looked over at Lily, who had finished her drawing and was now staring at us with wide eyes. "She's been through a lot already," Sarah said, her voice tinged with worry. "I don't want her to get hurt." "I would never hurt her," I said softly. "I know I can't make up for the time I've lost, but I want to make the most of what's left." Sarah was quiet for a moment, and then she finally spoke. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this isn't going to be easy. It's not just about me trusting you, it's about Lily. And she's going to need time." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "I understand," I said, "and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Sarah stood up and walked over to Lily, who had been watching us closely. She crouched down beside her and whispered something in her ear. Lily looked up at me, her eyes still unsure, but there was something different in her expression now. Maybe it was the faintest hint of acceptance. "You can stay," Sarah said, her voice steady. "But you need to prove it. To both of us." "I will," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. This was it. The beginning of something new. Something I would fight for, no matter what. I arrived at Sarah's apartment the next afternoon, feeling more determined than ever to prove myself. The weight of the promise I made hung heavily on my shoulders, but there was also a glimmer of hope. Sarah had agreed to give me a chance, and now I had to make it count. The past few days had been a blur of trying to understand how to navigate this new chapter in my life. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew it was something I couldn't walk away from. I was ready to face whatever it took. As I knocked on the door, I found myself holding my breath. When Sarah opened it, she seemed calmer than the last time we spoke. Her eyes still held a touch of caution, but they weren't as guarded as before. "Hey," I said quietly, stepping inside. "I just wanted to check in, see how things are going." "Things are okay," Sarah replied, her voice soft but steady. "I'm still processing everything. Lily's adjusting, but she's doing better." "Good," I said, feeling a sense of relief. "And how are you?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, clearly thinking about how to answer. "I'm managing," she said, offering a small smile. "This is all a lot to take in, but I'm willing to see where it goes. For Lily's sake." That was all I needed to hear. "Thank you," I said earnestly. "I don't want to rush things. I just want to show you both that I'm here to stay, that I'm not going anywhere." We walked into the living room, where Lily was playing quietly with her toys. She looked up as we entered, her big brown eyes studying me with a quiet curiosity. "Hey, kiddo," I said, sitting down on the couch beside her. She didn't say anything at first, but after a few moments, she handed me a drawing she had been working on. It was a picture of a house with a big sun shining down on it. "This is our house," she said softly, her voice full of innocence. "Mommy and me and you." My heart swelled with emotion as I looked at the drawing. She was still figuring out what it all meant, but she had already started including me in her world. It's beautiful, I said, smiling at her. Thank you for sharing it with me. Lily nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. Sarah watched us from across the room, her expression softening just a little. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but moments like these, small, simple gestures, were the beginning of something new. I was starting to realize that being a father wasn't about grand gestures or flashy promises. It was about being there in the small moments and showing up when it counted. After a few minutes of sitting together, Sarah stood up. I have to make dinner, she said. Do you want to stay and eat with us? I hesitated for a moment, unsure of where this invitation stood. It wasn't an official family dinner, but it was still a step. I nodded, a small smile crossing my face. I'd love to. We spent the evening together, sharing dinner and talking about small things, what Lily had been doing at school, Sarah's day at work, and what the future might look like. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was real. After dinner, Sarah stood up to clean the dishes, and I offered to help. You don't have to, she said, her voice tired but appreciative. I've got it. I want to. I insisted, walking over to the sink. I started washing the dishes, quietly working alongside her. We didn't need to talk every second, but there was something comforting about sharing this space, about doing something simple and domestic together. It felt like progress, even if it was small. After we finished, Sarah and I sat down on the couch, while Lily played quietly in the corner. I know it's going to take time, Sarah said softly, her voice almost hesitant. But I'm starting to believe that maybe we can figure this out. We will, I replied, my voice firm with conviction. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. I promise you. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was part of something real, something that mattered. It wasn't a perfect situation, but it was a beginning. And that was enough for me. As I looked over at Sarah, I could see the walls she had built around herself beginning to soften just a little. I knew it would take time to earn her trust, but I was willing to wait. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. The road ahead wasn't clear, and there would be obstacles to overcome, but I was ready for it. I was ready to be the man I should have been. For Sarah, for Lily, for the family I had lost, and was now trying to rebuild. I woke up the next morning with a sense of determination I hadn't felt in years. The past few days had been full of small steps, moments of connection with Sarah and Lily that made me believe, just for a moment, that we could build something meaningful together. But I knew that if I wanted this to work, I couldn't afford to take it slow. I had to be proactive. I had to prove to Sarah that I was here for the long haul. For Lily, too. That evening, I was scheduled to meet Sarah and Lily for dinner again. The past few nights had been about feeling each other out, finding comfort in the small, simple moments. Tonight, I wanted to take things a step further. I wanted to show them that I was more than just a man who'd shown up and promised change. I wanted to show them that I could be part of their everyday life. As I got ready, I reflected on the conversation we had had the night before. Sarah had opened up, just a little. She had started to trust me again, and I wasn't going to let her down. I knew she had her doubts, but I also knew that I had a chance. The phone buzzed on my desk, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. Lily is excited about dinner tonight. I think she's starting to get used to the idea of you being here. But we'll see how it goes. A small smile tugged at my lips as I read the message. It was a start. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door. The drive to their apartment felt longer than usual, but it gave me time to think. It gave me time to prepare for what was to come. When I arrived, I found Sarah in the kitchen, cooking dinner as usual. She looked up when she heard the door open and offered me a small smile. You're early, she said, wiping her hands on a towel. I wanted to make sure I was here on time, I replied. I've been looking forward to this. Sarah nodded, but her expression was still cautious. Lily's in the living room. She's been waiting for you. I walked into the living room, where Lily was sitting on the floor, surrounded by her toys. She looked up when I entered and smiled. Hi, Mr. Jameson, she said shyly. Hey there, kiddo. I replied, kneeling down to her level. What are you working on? She held up a drawing of a big house, with a sun and two stick figures in front. It's a picture of my family, she said, her voice soft. My heart swelled at the simplicity of her words. She had already started to accept me, in her own way. It's beautiful, I said, smiling at her. Thank you for sharing it with me. Lily smiled back, her eyes lighting up. I'm glad you like it, she said. Maybe we can all live in a house like that someday. Her words hit me harder than I expected. There was so much innocence in them, so much hope. And I realized, in that moment, that I had to do whatever it took to make sure that hope wasn't crushed. Sarah appeared in the doorway, watching us with a quiet intensity. She didn't say anything, but I could tell that she was watching to see how I interacted with Lily. I stood up, walking over to Sarah. "Dinner smells amazing," I said, trying to break the tension that was still hanging in the air. She smiled faintly. "It's just spaghetti," she said, turning back to the stove. "Nothing fancy." I followed her into the kitchen, and we began setting the table together. The silence between us was comfortable, but it wasn't easy. We were both still figuring things out. We both still had a lot to prove. "How's she doing?" I asked softly, glancing over at Lily, who was still busy with her drawing. "She's adjusting," Sarah said, her voice quiet. "But she's still a little unsure about everything. She's not used to having you around." I nodded, understanding. "I get it. I just want her to know I'm here for her. I'm not going anywhere." Sarah turned to face me, her expression serious. "You have to earn that trust, Jameson. It's not just about showing up. You've missed so much already." I nodded again, my heart heavy with the weight of her words. "I know, and I'm ready to work for it. For both of you." The conversation paused as we finished setting the table, and soon, we were all sitting down to eat. Lily dug in right away, and I followed her lead, trying to keep the mood light. It wasn't easy. I could feel the weight of the moment, but I also knew that this was the beginning of something. Dinner was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Sarah and I exchanged a few glances, and I could feel the tension between us slowly start to ease. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. After dinner, we cleaned up together, working side by side in silence. Lily was playing in the other room, and I could hear her humming to herself. As we finished up, Sarah turned to me. "You know," she said, "I wasn't sure about all of this at first, about you coming back into our lives. But you're trying, and that means something." I looked at her, my heart pounding in my chest. "I won't let you down," I said, my voice steady. "I'll prove it to you. To both of you." Sarah nodded, her gaze softening. "We'll see. But it's a start." I smiled, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in a long time. We weren't there yet, but we were getting there. Slowly, but surely. I woke up the next morning feeling more grounded than I had in a long time. The previous night's dinner had been a quiet turning point. For the first time in years, it felt like I was beginning to piece my life back together, not just in terms of my business or career, but with the two people who mattered most. Sarah and Lily. The promise I had made to Sarah, the promise to be a part of their lives, to be the father Lily deserved, was not something I could take lightly. I knew that actions spoke louder than words, and the small steps we had taken together the night before had been meaningful, but now I had to keep moving forward. There were no shortcuts, no easy fixes. It was a long road ahead, but one I was ready to walk. I spent the morning trying to keep my mind occupied, going through the usual business tasks, but it felt different today. My thoughts kept drifting back to Sarah, to Lily, and what the future held. I wasn't sure where this path would lead, but I knew it had to lead somewhere better than the past. Later that afternoon, I found myself back at Sarah's apartment. This time, there was no hesitation in my step. I wasn't just showing up to fulfill a promise. I was showing up because I wanted to, because I was ready to be part of their lives. As I knocked on the door, I was greeted by the familiar sight of Sarah. She looked up from her phone when she saw me. And this time, her expression was more welcoming. "Hi," she said, her voice softer than I had heard before. "Come in. Lily's been asking about you." My heart warmed at her words. I had been so focused on earning Sarah's trust, I hadn't stopped to think about how Lily might be adjusting. "I'm glad to hear that," I replied, stepping inside. I found Lily in the living room, sitting on the floor surrounded by her toys, but she was watching me closely. "Hey, Lily," I said softly, crouching down to her level. She looked up at me, then slowly smiled. "Hi," she said, her voice shy but friendly. "I made something for you." She handed me a drawing, and I took it with a gentle smile. It was a picture of a tree with a big sun shining down on it, and the tree had two stick figures underneath it, one smaller than the other. I looked at the drawing for a moment, then at Lily, my heart swelling with emotion. "It's beautiful," I said. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Lily's face lit up, a sense of pride crossing her features. "It's you and me and Mommy," she said. I looked over at Sarah, who had been standing by the doorway, watching us. She smiled, But there was still something in her eyes, a cautious hope. I stood up, holding the drawing in my hands. I want to help make sure you both always have sunshine like that in your lives, I said, my voice steady. That's why I'm here. To be part of this. To be part of your lives. Sarah's smile faltered for just a second before she nodded, her eyes softening. I know you're trying, she said quietly. But trying isn't enough. You have to show us that you can keep your promises. You've already missed so much, Jameson. I could hear the challenge in her words, but there was no anger, just truth. I know, I replied. And I will. I'll show you, and I'll show Lily. I'm not going anywhere. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned to Lily. Why don't you go play in your room for a little bit? Sarah suggested. Lily nodded and stood up, walking away with her drawing clutched in her hands. She's still processing everything, Sarah said, her voice softer now. She doesn't understand what's going on, but she wants to believe you. She just doesn't know if she can. I get it, I said, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I won't push her. I just want to be there when she's ready. Sarah looked at me, her expression still wary but no longer as guarded. That's all I can ask, she said quietly. But you have to understand, Jameson. She's my priority. If she gets hurt in this, I won't forgive you. I understand, I said, my voice firm but filled with sincerity. I promise, I'll do whatever it takes to prove that I'm not here to hurt her or you. There was a long silence between us, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with something else. A sense of hope. A sense that, maybe, we could start over. Sarah finally nodded. Okay, she said, her voice steady. Let's take it one day at a time. For Lily's sake. That's all I can ask for, I replied. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. We had a long way to go, and trust wasn't something that could be built overnight. But I was ready for the challenge. I had already lost too much time, and I wasn't going to let that happen again. As I left Sarah's apartment later that evening, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and hope. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready to walk it. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had something worth fighting for. I woke up early the next morning, the soft light of the sun filtering through the blinds, casting a warm glow in the room. It was the first morning in weeks that I didn't feel the heavy weight of guilt and uncertainty pressing down on me. The night before had been another small step towards something real, something I wasn't sure I would ever find again. But now, as I lay in bed, I knew it was just the beginning. I had to keep proving myself. The promise I made to Sarah and Lily wasn't something I could take lightly. I had missed so much already, and I couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. After a quick shower and a cup of coffee, I made my way to the office, my thoughts still on the events of the previous night. Sarah and I had talked more, slowly starting to find common ground. But there was a part of me that still wondered if it was enough. Was I really doing enough to make a difference in their lives? Was I moving fast enough to heal the wounds of the past? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to give up. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. * Lily has been asking about you again. She's starting to get used to the idea of you being around, but she still has her doubts. I think she needs more time. * I smiled softly at the message, feeling a mixture of pride and responsibility. It wasn't easy, but it was progress. I texted her back, letting her know I was looking forward to seeing them again later. It wasn't going to be a grand gesture, not today, but I would keep showing up. I would keep being there. As I drove to Sarah's apartment later that evening, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. I wasn't rushing into anything. This wasn't about winning Sarah's heart overnight. It was about proving myself over time, showing her, and Lily, that I was committed to being part of their lives. When I arrived, I was greeted by Lily at the door, her eyes bright when she saw me. "Hi, Mr. Jameson," she said excitedly, her small voice full of warmth. I smiled, crouching down to her level. "Hey there, kiddo. How's it going?" She handed me a drawing she had made earlier that day. "It's for you," she said proudly. I took the drawing from her hands and looked at it. It was a picture of a family sitting around a dinner table, with a big heart drawn above them. "This is us," she said. "Mommy, me and you." My heart swelled in my chest as I looked at the drawing. It was so simple, so pure, and yet it felt like everything. "It's beautiful," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Lily." She beamed at me, clearly pleased with herself. "You're welcome." As I stood up, Sarah came into the room, her eyes softening as she watched the interaction between me and Lily. "You're getting good at this," she said, her voice warm but still cautious. "She's really starting to warm up to you." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. "I hope so. I'm just here to be a part of her life, and to show you both that I'm serious." Sarah gave me a small smile, but there was still a trace of doubt in her eyes. "We'll see," she said. "But it's a good sign. A small one, but a good one." Dinner that night was simple. Spaghetti and salad, nothing fancy, but it felt like a home-cooked meal. The kind of dinner where you talk about your day, where you laugh at little jokes, and where the world outside fades away. As we ate, Sarah and I talked more about the future. It was still awkward, but it wasn't uncomfortable. We were beginning to understand each other again. "You know, Lily's been asking a lot of questions," Sarah said as she passed the bread. "About you, about why you're here. She doesn't really understand yet, but I think she wants to." "I know," I replied, looking over at Lily, who was concentrating on her plate. "I'm not trying to rush her, or you. I just want to be here when she's ready." Sarah nodded, a slight smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I know you do. But remember, it's not just about her. It's about me too." I looked at her, my gaze steady. "I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. I meant what I said. I'm here for both of you." The rest of the evening was quiet. After dinner, we sat together on the couch, watching a movie. Lily curled up next to her mom, her head resting on Sarah's shoulder. It was a small, quiet moment, but it felt like everything I had been missing. It felt like I was finally becoming part of their world. As the movie ended, I stood up to leave, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "I'll see you both tomorrow?" I asked, looking at Sarah. She nodded, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a glimmer of trust in her eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "We'll see how it goes." I smiled, feeling a sense of hope flood through me. It wasn't a perfect situation, and there was still so much work to be done. But it was a start, and that was enough. For now, that was enough. I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, the light of a new day filling the room. The events of the past few days had been a whirlwind, but I had never felt more determined. The bond one was slowly building with Sarah, and Lily was fragile, but it was real, and that gave me hope. The road ahead would be long, but I was ready to walk it. The previous night had been another step in the right direction. Despite all the tension and uncertainty, Sarah had given me a chance, an opportunity to prove myself, and I wasn't going to waste it. I got out of bed, made myself a cup of coffee, and quickly prepared for the day ahead. My thoughts were still with Sarah and Lily. I couldn't afford to make the same mistakes again. I had to show Sarah that I could be the father I had promised to be, not just for her, but for Lily too. I couldn't afford to let the past define my future. After a few hours in the office, I decided it was time to head over to Sarah's place. I had promised her I would take things slow, but I was beginning to understand what Sarah meant by that. It wasn't just about letting things happen naturally. It was about proving that I was in it for the long haul. I was ready to take responsibility, to show them that I was committed. When I arrived at Sarah's apartment, I found her sitting in the living room, flipping through a book. Lily was at the kitchen table, drawing something intently. Sarah looked up when I entered, offering a small smile. "You're here early," she said, setting the book down. "I thought I'd come by a little earlier today," I replied. "I wanted to make sure I have time to help out." "Help out?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I want to be part of your routine. I don't want to just be an occasional visitor. I want to show Lily that I'm here." Sarah's expression softened just a little. "I know you're trying, but you've got a long way to go," she said. "Lily's still figuring out who you are to her. She's confused, but she's starting to trust you." Slowly, I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I understood. "I'll take things slow," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." Sarah didn't respond immediately. She just nodded and motioned for me to sit. Lily, noticing I was there, turned her head and smiled shyly. "Hi, Mr. Jameson," she said, her voice still soft but warmer than before. "Hi, Lily," I replied, sitting down at the table next to her. "What are you drawing today?" She held up a piece of paper and showed me her picture. It was a drawing of a tree with a swing hanging from one of the branches. There were two stick figures sitting on the swing, smiling. "It's us," she said, her face lighting up. "Mommy, me and you." My heart swelled at the sight of her drawing. "It's beautiful," I said. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Lily beamed at the compliment, her eyes shining with pride. "You're welcome," she said, her voice full of innocence. As I sat there, looking at the drawing, I realized just how much this meant. Lily was starting to understand. She was letting me in, little by little. And that gave me the strength to keep going. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that if I kept showing up, if I kept proving myself, I might be able to build something real with them. Sarah watched us from across the room, her arms folded. "She's still cautious," she said, her tone quiet but serious. "She's not used to you being here. But she wants to be. She wants to believe you." "I know," I said softly, my gaze never leaving Lily. "And I'm not going to rush her. I want her to come to me when she's ready." Sarah nodded, her gaze shifting to Lily. "I don't want her to get hurt," she said quietly. "I know you've made mistakes, and I know that trust takes time. But you need to prove it, Jameson." I looked at Sarah, my eyes steady. "I will," I said, my voice firm. "I'll prove it to both of you. I won't give up." Sarah's expression softened slightly, and she finally nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice a little more open. "We'll see how it goes." I stayed for a while longer, talking with Sarah and Lily, just enjoying the time spent together. The conversations were simple, but they meant everything to me. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about being there in the small moments, showing them I was committed. When I left later that evening, I felt a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't a huge breakthrough, but it was progress. Sarah and Lily were starting to let me in, and that was all I could ask for. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be ups and downs. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. I wasn't just trying to fix the past. I was building a future with them, one day at a time. I walked into Sarah's apartment once again, but today felt different. There was a quiet calm in the air that wasn't there before, something that hinted at progress, at understanding. Lily was playing with her toys on the floor, her small hands busy with a puzzle, but her eyes flickered up to me as soon as I entered. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes lifted from a book, but she had that same familiar, cautious look. It was clear she was still processing everything, still testing the waters, but there was something in the way she greeted me this time, something that felt warmer than before. "You're early," she said with a small smile, setting the book down. "I thought I'd get here before you today," I replied, trying to lighten the mood. I hadn't quite figured out the balance yet, but I was getting better. I had learned that every moment with Sarah and Lily mattered, no matter how small. No rushed words, no grand gestures, just being there and showing up. I watched as Lily got up and walked toward me, the same shy but trusting smile on her face. "Hi, Mr. Jameson," she said, her voice soft but filled with a sweetness that melted my heart. "Hey there, kiddo," I said as I crouched down to her level. "How's the puzzle coming along?" She smiled brightly, the puzzle pieces strewn across the floor. "I almost finished it. Do you want to help?" My heart swelled. This was the kind of moment I had been hoping for, the first real connection where Lily wasn't just accepting me as a visitor. She was letting me in. "Of course," I said. "Let me see if I can help you." "Finish it." As we worked on the puzzle together, I couldn't help but steal glances at Sarah, who was sitting at the table, watching us with a quiet expression. She had said it herself. Trust wasn't something that came easily for her, and it was going to take time. But now, there was no distance between us. I was here, present, in the little moments with them. And it felt like the first real step toward the family I had dreamed of being part of. "You're doing good," Sarah finally said, breaking the silence. I looked up at her, unsure of what she meant. "You're not rushing it," she continued. "You're letting Lily take her time. I can see it. She's getting used to you being here. It's not easy for her, but I think she's starting to trust you." I nodded, my chest tight with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. I'm here to stay." She stood up, walking over to join us. "I know. I can see that. And I'm starting to believe you, even if it's hard." I stood up and smiled at her, then turned to Lily. "How about we finish this puzzle and then have a snack? I think we deserve a reward for working so hard." Lily's face lit up, and she clapped her hands. "Yes, a snack. The small, simple joys of a family, the kind of moments I had been missing for so long." We all moved into the kitchen, and as Sarah prepared the snacks, Lily and I talked about the puzzle and how we were going to finish it. It wasn't much, just a snack and a puzzle, but to me, it was everything. It was what I had been missing, what I had been fighting for. After we ate, I helped clean up, just doing the little things that showed I was here for the long haul. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic moment. It was just me, being here, with them, showing up as I promised I would. Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Sarah and I sat down in the living room, the quiet hum of the city outside filling the space. We didn't say much at first, just letting the silence speak for itself. It wasn't uncomfortable, just a moment of reflection. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I think we're getting there," she said softly, looking at me. "You're trying. And I'm starting to see that you're serious about being here for Lily. And for me." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "I am serious," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm not going anywhere." Sarah smiled, but it wasn't the guarded smile I had seen before. It was something else, something that told me that she was beginning to let go of her fears, even if just a little. "I believe you," she said. "It's going to take time, but I'm willing to give it a chance." The moment hung between us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page. I wasn't asking for everything to change overnight. I knew it wouldn't, but I was ready to be there, every day, in the little moments, building trust with each passing second. As I left that night, I felt a sense of calm settle in my chest. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time, I believed we had a chance. A real chance at building something beautiful, something worth fighting for. And as I walked out into the cool night air, I knew this was just the beginning.